Okay, we are up to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, we're 8 lines from the top on Daf Yud Amud Aleph. We're 8 lines on the top on Daf Yud Amud Aleph when we're at the first word of the line. Tanu Rabbanim. And so Tanal Hasam. We learned over there. Gimel Mashkin Asurin Mishum Giloi. There's 3 mashkin that if they're left out, they're usur because we're afraid that a snake drank from it. Mayim, water, the yain and wine, the cholav and milk. Kama yishu the asurin. How long would you have to leave them neglected? And then you need to be concerned about a snake having drank from it. Zokstrim Brisa kedei sheyetze harechesh mimakim karoi v'yishter. Enough time for a snake to come out of a very nearby place where it would be concealed and drink. The chama makim karoi, and what's considered a close place. Amri Abitzak B'Redav Yehuda kedei sheyetze mitachas oizen kli v'yishter. Imagine it could come right out from the bottom of the keli, if it could be hidden there, and drink. If there's only enough time for the snake to get out of its hiding place and to drink, well, that means when you come, you'll catch it in the act. Yishta hakachazalei. Ella yishta v'yachsa l'chayrai. The amount of time that it would take for a snake to come, drink, and get back and be concealed, so when you come back, you don't see anything, you would have to be choshish that a snake drank from it, and therefore it will be usher. Itmar Zok the Gemara. We have a machlekes. Hashoichet pesakin v'nimsus peguma. You shechted with a knife, and after you shechted, you saw that the knife had a pekam. Rafuna, Zok Rafuna, afilu shiber ba'atzomis koloyim. Even if after the shechita, before you examined the knife, you were crushing bones with this knife, so we know for sure that it would have gotten a pagam from the bones that it was crushing. Psula, the shchita prior is still psula because chashina and shemar ba'or nifkama. We're afraid that there's a possibility that the hide of the animal that had to be cut at the beginning of the shchita, that could have damaged the knife, so it's possible that this knife was pogum when it actually cut the saman. Rav Chisda Amar, Rav Chisda says kshera. You know why? Shema be'etzem nifkama. Maybe it became nifkam from the crushing the bone activities that you did after you shechted. Zoktam alabishta Amar Rav Huna kishmaitze. Rav Huna is consistent. He taught us yesterday that a behema b'chayel is becheskas isrei medes ad sheyivad alach b'menishchata. So we need to be sure. We're not sure the behema has a cheskas isser. Allah Reb Chisda, who holds that the behemoth's kosher, my time, what could possibly be the justification for that? I can mark it. Amar Lach, you know what the Chisda can say? Etzem vade poigim. There's no doubt that if you're crushing bones with a knife, you're going to destroy the chalaf. Or suffik poigim, suffik loy poigim. The or, we don't know. It's not a definite knife killer. So therefore, have a suffix of adai. There is a suffix. Maybe it was damaged by the or, but it was for sure damaged by the bones. So that is the machlokes between Rav Chisda and Rav Huna. Mosif Rava l'siyuye l'Rav Huna. Rava had a kasha that would be on Rav Chisda that would prove Rav Huna right that the knife that you found the pagam in later, the behemoth shechted with that knife will be possible. Toval v'Allah. Someone toveled, and then he finished it tefillah. And after a couple of hours later, he found upon him something that would have been a chatzitza. That had it been on him, b'shas tefillah, it wouldn't have been a good tefillah. Even though whatever was on his, let's say there was tar on his hand, there was a chatzitza, even after he went to the mikveh, he was working with tar the entire day. So there's a very strong likelihood that the tar showed up on the skin, the chatzitza occurred after the mikveh. Loy also loy tefillah. It's not a good tefillah. Not sheyomer until he can say bari li shloy haya alai koydem lachem. Unless he's 100% sure that the chatzitza was not upon him during the tefillah. Frag the Gemara, v'hahacha, the case of the mikveh, the vade tava, he surely toveled, savik hava alei, savik lo hava alei. It's a savik whether or not the chatzitza was upon him or not. V'ka'asi savik u'moitzi midavadai. Yet the savik is moitzi midavadai. So oibazoi, you Reb Chisda, how could you say that ain't savik moitzi midavadai? And therefore, let's say the pagam came from the bones. By the case of mikveh, we're concerned about that savik, and we're concerned that he might have had that chatzitza upon him b'shas the tefillah. Zok the Gemara, it's not a kash on Reb Chisda. Shiny Hasam, there it's different. The ikal meimer hame tamei al cheskasai ve'emaloi taval. In the mikvah's case, there's a cheskas, a chazaka demeikara of the person who was tamei, who before he toiveled, he was tamei. For the Gemara, that doesn't change it with us. In our case, with the behema as well. Hachanami hame behema al cheskasa ve'emer loy nishchata. So it's tzurich for Reb Chisda. Zok Reb Chisda, no, Harry Shchuta lefanecha, the animal is shechted over here. How could you say Hamid behem al chaskasa? Zok the Gemara, well, if you're going to say Shchuta lefanecha, hachanami Harry tava lefanecha, so at the end of the day, they're identical. Yet you see clearly by the case of tefillah that you're choshid that it came first, and you don't say ein savik moitzi midavadai. Zok the Gemara, because hasyalda bereisa in the tefillah there's a reisa. There's a reisa here as well. You see a pekam in the second. Zok the Gemara, Reb Chisda can be mechalak as follows: Sakin is ra'oi, behema lo yisra'oi. Yes, there's a reisa, but there's not a reisa on the actual animal. By the tefillah, there's a reisa on the actual person. He was found with a chatzitza. But the case of the shechita, it's not the behema that has a reisa; it's the knife that got a reisa. So where the reisa shows up will have a great impact as to whether or not it will discount the chazaka before. Let's have a quick look at Rashi. Behema lo yisroi, bechivon the lav begufa mamish isyalit. The reisa did not occur in the guf of the person himself. Ella bedavar acher. Rather in an external item, I'm sorry, by the shechita, it's not in the animal itself, it's in an external item like the knife. Loi dami l'tefillah. You cannot compare the case of shechita to the case of tefillah. And therefore, v'loi asi safuk dereisa, the sakin, the safuk of a reisa and the sakin, umoitzi oisai midei shechita vadois, the vadai etzem pagam. We know for sure that the bones that he was crushing with his chalaf later on would have had made a pagam. So that is the chiddush of Reb Chisda, that you don't just look at a reisa, you look at where the reisa is. The only time we discount the previous chazaka is if the reisa is in what we're making a diyun upon. But if the reisa is on an external item like a knife, even though it will impact the status of the behema, that's not going to contradict or neutralize the previous chazaka. We still have a kasha on Reb Chisda. What happens if it's shachad es haveshet? You were shechting a bird, and you shechted a veshet, meaning you shechted one siman, and by a bird, if you shecht one siman, the animal is already kosher. The achlach nishpta hagageres, and then the gageres, the windpipe, got dislodged. Rashi is who then if it was the opposite. You shechted one siman, and then afterwards the other siman got dislodged. It's kosher. Because of the next case, we're dovetailing into the next case. But what if it's nishmit hagageres, the achlach shachad es haveshet? That's psula because it's a treifa. But shachad es haveshet v'nimtza hagageres shmuta. What if you have a suffix? So you don't know if this animal was a treifa before it got the heter shchita, or if it happened afterwards and it's not a treif at all. So this exact story, Zahaya Maisa, this occurred. The Amru, and they said, now what they should have just said is Psula, but they didn't say Psula. They said, Kol Sofik B'Shchita Pasul. So obviously they're not just paskening on this case that it's possible. They're referring to a broad case of Sofik that's going to be possible. Kol Sofik B'Shchita Lasuyemai. When they paskin Kol Sofik B'Shchita, what other Sofik were they referring to with this grand proclamation? Zok Gemara, Lav Lasui Gavna. Maybe it's to talk about exactly this case where we have our machloikes between Rav Huna and Reb Chisda. In the case where the knife was found after the shchita, after he chopped bones with it, the knife was found with a pagam. And Kol Sofik is possible. So you have a right to Rav Huna. So Reb Chisda loy suye Sofik shah Sofik daras. Do you know what when we say Kol Sofik B'Shchita Pasul, it's including as well if we had a Sofik if someone made Shehiyah, or if we had a Sofik if someone made Drasa, or any one of the other Psulei Shchita. As opposed to if we have a Sofik if the knife was Pogum, because if the knife was Pogum, it's not the Behemoth that was Israeli, it's the knife that was Israeli.
Not part of.
Correct. So you're saying very good. So now we've broadened it. It's not just if there's a race in the Gufa Behema. If there's a race in the Gufa Shchita as well, it would if impact the Cheskos Kashrus. Freit the Gemara Umay Shna Hasam Is Yalida Bareisa Bebehema Umay Shna. I'm sorry. I Hasafik Vasafik. So Hasam Is Yalida Bareisa Bebehema. There's a race on the behem itself. Hacha sakin shrai behema lo yisrai. So when there's a suffix shah, suffix daras, or a suffix if the simon was dislodged before the shchita, that's a suffix that's erased on the behema itself. But when there's only a question on the knife, sakin shrai behema lo yisrai. Zok the Gemara v'hilchas hakavasei Rav Huna. We pass like Rav Huna that the shchitos psula kishaloi shibar ba'etzem. If you didn't break bones with this knife after the shchita, so if then you might ask, if you didn't break any bones, so how in the world did it get nicked as vadai from the or? No, because there's a possibility that when he shechted, he went too far and he hit the mafrekas. He hit the spine of the behema, and that's what could have damaged the knife. So there we'll pass like Rav Huna. If it was loy shibar be'etzem, we'll pass like Rav Huna, and we'll be choshed that the pekab came from the or. But if you know for sure that he broke bones, he pounded bones, he crushed bones with this knife after the shchita, then we would be meko like Rav Chisda. Now, from the fact that we paskin like Rav Huna, even kishaloi shibur ba'etzem, it must be only kishaloi shibur ba'etzem. It's much that Rav Chisda would hold, even if he didn't break any bones with the knife, you still say the knife was kosher b'shas shchita. So, freit Gemara mechlal Rav Chisda afal gav do l'shibur ba'etzem el b'mayifkim. What exactly is Rav Chisda going to be titled it in that would have occurred after the shchita, in order to say that it was a good knife b'shas shchita? So tomorrow ema be'etzem de mafrekas ifkim. You know where there was another opportunity for this knife to become pogum on the spinal cord, not on the spinal cord, on the spine itself, on the neck bone. Yeah, well, it's part of the spine, right? If he wasn't careful and he moved too quickly, he'd give it a crack in the bone, and the bone would be pogum the knife. Beautiful. Hava ufta. There was a story once upon a time. V'tarif Rabbi Yosef ad taleiser chayusa. Rabbi Yosef paskined on 13 animals that it was treif, meaning Zok Rashi shaloi bodak bein zu lezu. There was no bedika until 13 shchitas were made. Ula'acha shchitas kulan nimtas paguma. After shackling 13 animals, they found the knife was pogum. Rabbi Yosef paskin that they're all treif. Come on. So who does Rabbi Yosef hold like between Rav Huna and Rav Chisda? It must be like he holds a Kabhuna, because he says that we have to be choshed that the knife became pogum before the first animal, and therefore vafilu bekamaisa. So therefore Rabbi Yosef would have even answered the first animal, because the chashash is it became pogum, the knife became pogum from the height of the neck of the animal. So Dr. Gemara Loi, maybe that's not what Rabbi Yosef meant when we say tarif atleisha chayusa. Maybe he also kapchista ulevar mikamaisa, and they're all going to be kosher except for the first of the argument. I'm sorry. They're all going to be possible except for the first, because according to Chisda, the first one would be mutter, because we'll say that the knife became pogum when it hit the first mafrekas. Let's have a look at Rashi. Nami trefa the chashinon laor. It's not a kasha. We're speculating. What did Rabbi Yosef do? What was the story? So Dr. Merloi, maybe he did like a Chista when we should etzem afrekas the kamaisa tarfinu lechul basraisa, because we're concerned that the chalaf hit the neck bone of the first animal. Therefore, the first animal would be mutter, but the rest of them would all be aser. Or you could say l'olam krafuna. Let's say it's going according to Rav Huna, and therefore all of them are aser. The Iker of Chista, because if you want to say it's going according to Rav Chista, then why would they all be possible? Why would you say that he hit the neck bone of the first animal? Michli, Misla Talinan. We're saying that it happened afterwards. It happened afterwards when he hit after the first Shchita, when he hit the Mafrekas. Mimai de Be'etzim de Mafrekas, the Kamaisa Ifkim, Dilma Be'etzim de Mafrekas, the Basraisa Ifkim. Once you're blaming it on the Mafrekas, who said it happened on the first mafrekas? Maybe it happened on the last mafrekas. And therefore, you could still have your chazaka.
And you can never check the knife and determine from the dick or whatever.
No. Michli misla talinan, Zokrashi. The ha vadai negia sakin b'mafrekas loy pogma tvei me'ar. It's not like crushing bones. Hitting a mafrekas is not like crushing bones, which for sure going to make a nick in the knife. There's no greater chance that the mafrekas will cause a nick in the knife than the hide. I guess the mafrekas isn't that hard. It's bouncy. There's cartilage there. Oh, no, I'm wrong. It's because when you're shechting, you're not whacking it like you would do if you were whacking bones. You're making a shchita, and you might have went a little bit too far in your motion of back and forth. So there you wouldn't have pushed hard against the bone. Pafilu hachi, and nevertheless, Tali Beilakula will still blame it on the mafrekas. Hilchach hishachat behemas tuva. If there's many behemas shechted, Tali nami abchista b'mafrekas to basraisa umachshir luhu. He would have said that the last mafrekas did it, which then would have allowed all the animals to be kosher. Therefore, Rabbi Yosef, who answered all these animals, must hold like Rav Huna. Omar le Rav Acha b'rei de Rav Rav Ashi. Rav Kahana matrich b'dikusa bein kol chada v'chada. Rav Kahana held that when you shecht multiple behemoths, you have to be boidik between each behemoth. Come on, who does Rav Kahana hold like? So tomorrow it makes sense to say that he holds like Rav Huna. Ula mifsal kamaisa. If you didn't check after the first shchita, even the first shchita will be possible.
Why?
Because maybe the knife got nicked on the or. Yeah. Zok Gemara loy. No, maybe Rav Kahana could even be.
We never check. We never said you have to check after the art.
You're middle of shechting. You can't.
Right. So how would you know?
If you checked afterwards and there was no nick, then if you checked afterwards and there was no nick, there's obviously not a nick during the shchita because you checked after the shchita. But if you're going to check the knife after the shchita and the knife does not have any nicks, then you know that when you shechted the simonim, that prior that it didn't have a nick.
It's not just for the next behemoth.
It's for the past behemoth as well. Correct. That's called checking it in the nick of time. Make sense?
Yeah. That's your type
But
of
you can do it.
nick of time.
Oh, thank you.
But why are we assuming that it reached the neck bone?
We're not assuming, but the knife is pogum.
The one who does the shita, he will know.
So, but the knife is pogum. So where could that pagam have come from? It didn't come out of thin air. It happened when he hit something. So either it happened when he hit the or.
No, the difference. Oh, if he checked before, or if he didn't check before, then we know.
Right. So when he checked before, it was fine. He checked after, it was nicked. Do you blame the nick on the or and then the animal is puzzle, or do you blame the nick on the mafrekas and then the animal is kosher? So Zog to Gemara, it must be that Rav Kahana holds like Rav Huna, and he holds that you're going to assume, or you at least be choishish, that it got nicked on the or. Therefore, if you make the bedika after the whole shchita and there's no nick at all, then we don't need to worry. Zog to Gemara loy, maybe Rav Kahana is matrich a bedika bein shchita l'shchita, even according to Rav Chisda. Why would you need that for? Ulachshur basraisa, to say that the second animal should be kosher. So it's exactly what Moshe brought up. According to Rav Huna, you need the bedika after the shchita to ensure that the prior shchita was done with a sakin that was chad b'cholak. According to Rav Chisda, the prior shchita, the first shchita anyway, will assume that it was good, and that if anything, we'll say it happened after the first shchita. And therefore, like Rav Chisda ulachshur b'sraisa. Now, this is a very big problem, because what does it say over here? Loi ki Rav Chisda ulachshur b'sraisa, to make the last one puzzle, to make the last one kosher. The problem is, didn't we say before, Loi ki Rav Chisda ulavar mikamaisa? According to Rav Chisda, in the previous case, when we were talking about whether Rav Chisda could hold like Rabbi Yosef, we said that according to Rav Chisda, they'll all be possible, and you'll assume that the knife got damage on the mafrekas of the first animal, not of the last animal. Over here, we're saying we'll assume it happened by the last animal. What does Rav Chisda hold? So this is Rashi's kasha. So let's see Rashi. Lemifsal kamaisa, Rav Kahana, who required a bedika before and after each shchita, is it because he holds like Rav Huna, and if you wouldn't check after the first shchita, the first shchita will be possible? Boy, again, it's not a kasha. We're speculating what Rav Kahana holds. That Rav Kahana mandated immediately after the first shchita to be biting the knife. Is it because mishum di mishkachla peguma tarvla Rav Huna? Because if he finds that the knife is pogum, he'll even passel the first shchita. Maybe Rav Kahana, that requires the bedikas in between each animal, is going to go to Rav Chisda svirle. Remember, Rav Chisda says we're not choishish that the knife became pogum with the hide. So what would be the reason for the requirement of bedika? If you find that it's pogum after the first shchita, we'll still say the first shchita was good, but at least yisaknena, you'll be misaking the knife, so it'll be good for the next animals. The loy badak, because if you were not boidik and you shechted a whole batch of animals, and then after 10 animals, peguma, and you would find it pogum, we would be concerned that maybe this knife got damaged on the mafrekas of the first animal, and all the subsequent animals will be posel vasri rasraisa. Zokt Rashi, we have a problem, because a minute ago we didn't say that. Remember, before we said in Rav Chisda, Michti misla talinon. According to Rav Chisda, you're told that it happened later. So why say that it got damaged on the mafrekas of the first animal? Why did you say it got damaged on the mafrekas of the last animal? Right? That's what the Gemara said. And they should all be kosher. Over here, we're saying no. We're going to be concerned. We're going to be concerned that it got damaged after the first animal. The Afagav, the Meshanina Hachi, even though we're answering over here that we want to say Rav Kahana is consistent with Rav Chisda, and that even in Rav Chisda we're choshid that it got damaged on the first mafrekas, right? Dichuya ba'omahu. This is a dichuy. In our Gemara, it's not a real earnest pshat in Rav Chisda. Really, we're not really considering the Rav Kahana holds Rav Chisda, because according to Reb Chisda, they would all be kosher. You would assume that the knife got damaged by the last mafrekas, like we said earlier. But it's not true. Really, Rav Kahana Vadek Rav Huna Kamar. Really, that's not really legitimate. The last thing we learned, to say that Rav Kahana's requirement to make the bedika between each chita is not really legitimate to say that it's going according to Rav Chisda. It's going according to Rav Huna. And the question is, Lamivsal Kamaisa. If you wouldn't check the knife after each shchita, then you don't know if the prior shchita was a good shchita. Could the communal ill, like we said earlier on our daf, we pass like Rav Huna. And therefore, if you only shechting one, even only one behema, you need two bedikas, before and after. Because we need to be sure that the shchita that you just did was pristine. What if you shechted a whole batch of animals and you were not boidik in between and after the last animal at the end of the day, the acher kach nimtas peguma, afa rishoyna asur, they would all be yoser. According to Reb Chisda, they would all be mutter because you'll say that it got damaged by the last mafrekas. So there are those who ask, why would you say the last mafrekas? Why the last mafrekas, according to Reb Chisda, more than anyone in the middle? Once you say that the knife got damaged by the mafrekas, so why blame it on the last? How could Reb Chisda be so not concerned that it got damaged earlier? So I think the Mesivta brings down, because when you know you're shechting, when you know that you're shechting multiple behemoths, by each shchita you're going to be very careful to watch how deep you're going to make sure you stay away from the mafrekas.
That's what I was asking.
But by the last shchita of the day, you're done for the day anyway, so you won't be so careful and you might push a little too far.
What I was asking, the one who does shchita will know if he got reached.
He has to be very careful, yeah.
He feel that he reached the bone, because there's.
Right, so in fact, there's obviously, if he takes special care and he focuses very carefully on that, he could have some level. He can't be 1,000% sure, but he could have some level of confidence that he didn't cut the bone.
You don't have to assume that it reached the mafrekas.
That's right.
The one who does, if you trust who's doing
The reason why we know it hit a mafrekas, because we were biting it at the end and it was nicked. So it had to hit a mafrekas. How else did it get nicked? Now the question is which one. So Reb Chisda, the likelihood is it was by the last one, because there you would have been the least cautious.
Yeah.
So it's not a question if you hit it. You definitely hit it. There's a nick.
But it's soft, like the orc.
No, I was wrong. It's not because it was soft. Rashi told us, that's what I said, and then I learned Rashi, and Rashi was wrong. I have to start looking at Rashi more because I don't want to make the same mistake I made yesterday, right? So what does Rashi say? Rashi says, when it comes to the mafrekas, the giyasakim mafrekas loy pogmot tvei me'or sharei eni makalo b'koyach. It's not because it's soft. It's because you don't hit it. You're shechting gently. You're not slamming against the bone. When you slam against the bone, yes, there's a shchash pagam. But when you're moving very gently, the likelihood is that it wouldn't have been damaged by the bone. But if you know it's damaged, you'll blame it on the bone. Which bone would you blame it on? According to Chisda, the last bone, because that's where you would have likely been less cautious. Okay, Zok to Gemara weiter. So Allah L'maisa, we are paskening like Rav Huna. Frank the Gemara, if you're going to tell me that you require a brand new bedika, like Rav Kahana says, before each shchita, because you're really concerned that it was pogum, so every new shchita, shouldn't you require a bedikas chacham? Once your original bedika expired, because you did a shchita and there's a legitimate chashash that your knife got damaged, so you should need a rav to check your knife.
And you can't be your own rav.
Zok to Gemara, and you could be your own rav. We could trust you. Frank the Gemara, if that's the case, why bechlal do you got to show it to the rav in the first place? Yachim meikar nami loy. Zok to Gemara, the answer is it's a formality. It's not structurally required by halacha. You have to show respect to the chacham, and that's why he checks your knives. It's not al yoredeya that it would passel. It's to show respect. It's very interesting. Where else do you find in a mitzvah that is there a mitzvah before you shok a lulav? You have to show it to the Rav. You don't have to show it to the Rav. People do. They want to make sure they get their money's worth. But at the end of the day, it's an interesting mitzvah. Why happens by the mitzvah of shchita? There's an Indian to show it to the Rav.
But they don't have to show to the Rav each time they share.
Or each day, like
day.
each batch before each batch.
The first day is only three, I think.
Yeah. First day is the.
So that's a very interesting concept. I don't know the answer. I wonder if someone speaks about vos happens by shchita. There's this special honorary process that you show to Rav. Zog to Gemara.
It says here, the Rashba says, the Raiva's opinion, the local Cholokim should always insist on inspecting the knife himself rather than allowing someone else to do it. But since the shechita knife must be inspected meticulously, it's best for the community that the Cholokim do the inspection since he will surely be careful. So really want an extra level of caution.
Mm-hmm. And that's only required one, because it doesn't say extra level of caution. It says k'vay d'shal chacham.
Yeah, but because it should be inspected, he should do it since he will surely be very careful.
Because we don't pass like that. Nowadays, there is a special independent fellow who's not a shaykhit who checks the knives. But it's not the Rav HaMachshir. Rabbi Lloyd doesn't stand there all day checking knives, right? Or Rabbi Seifer, whoever the Machshir is for the Shechita. It's one of the shaykhim, I guess one of the head shaykhim, they appoint him. I'm sorry? Knife checker, yeah. Zok Gemara. So we talk about chazaka, you go about chazaka. Where do you even know there's such a thing called, who made up this concept that you can go basar chazaka? Ha milsa, the Amr Rabbanon, uki milsa chazake, and what did we use it for? Rabbi Huna used it to say that an animal is becheskas, iser, either machsikim isel iser from Ever Menachai to Nevela, or cheskas iser of Eino Zavuach. It's also in a cheskas heter of it's not being a treifa, right? We have a mikveh that is a chazaka that is kosher. We have a person that is a cheskas tuma. This concept of chazaka, where do we get it from? So this is a very yisaidistic Gemara. It's teaching us the yisaidis of chazaka. Amar Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar B'Yonasan. I'll tell you where we have it. When the Torah discusses nigei batim, the Torah states the following. It says, "V'yotza koyin min habayis." The koyin comes and he sees that there's a neg in the house. So the first thing he does is he leaves the house. El Pesach habayis. He leaves the house and he goes to the front of the house. The hiskir es habayis shivish yamim, and he locks up the house for 7 days. Frek the Gemara, between where he saw the nega in one of the back rooms and leaving the house, how does he know that the nega is still the same size as it was when he saw it? Maybe by the time he left the house before he locked it up, it was already shrunk and his hesker is not valid.
How are you going to judge that?
So it must be this chazaka. Zog to Gemara, Amar Ab Shmuel, Bar Nachmani, Amar B'Yonasan, Amar Kra, V'yotza koyin min habayis, El Pesach habayis, V'hiskers habayis shivish yamim. Dilma denafik v'asa, Botzer le shiura. Maybe by the time he goes out, it will be Botzer lo shiura. Zog to Gemara, El olav, it must be Mishum Damrinan Uki HaChazaka. It must be that we could rely on the Chazaka. Zog to Rashi, the Be'inan the Nepek, we call a bayis, you got to leave the whole house. You cannot be inside the house. So it's closed, you can't see anymore. Maybe the nega shrunk till he got outside. And therefore, it would be invalid. It's as if the nega was not there if it shrunk. Zog to Gemara, I have a very simple idea. You don't have to rely on the chazaka. Maybe you walked out backwards, so you're looking at the nega the whole time. There's two reasons why that's not valid. First of all, chada the yitzia derech hachayav lo shema yitzia. It says v'yotza koyin. Walking backwards does not qualify as a yitzia. A yitzia means walking properly. But the Gemara is going to actually slug it up. B'oid Even if you walk backwards, what if the neg is right behind the door? For sure you cannot see that. It's not opposite the door. The pasach b'kafsa, and if you're going to say that you actually have to cut open the window as he's backing out to see the nega, you could keep it within inside, so you don't need to rely on the chazaka. V'yatanan base awful ain't paschim b'chaloinos l'resis nigay. The halacha is if the house is dark, shady, doesn't have natural sunlight, you don't create light to see the nega. You're not making it easier. You don't make it easier to see the nega. So you're not going to cut windows open either. So Amalei Rava, that's not a taina. I'll prove to you it is. Because Kohen God, we have a Kippurim. How did he walk out of the Kodesh Kodashim? He walked it backwards. He didn't turn his back to the Kodesh Kodashim. Kohen God, it says the Kohen leaves the Kodesh Kodashim. Utanan yatsa uvaloi derech knisasa. He took steps backwards. So you see that does qualify as a yitzia. So you don't need a chazaka by negak. Maybe the Kohen walks out backwards. With the carbon by his oval in poishkin boy chaloinus lyrisis nigai. That's lechatchila to see b'chalal if there's a nega. Once you establish there's a nega, yes, you would cut a window to make sure it's visible as you back out. Hanamili echad lo yischazik abolochad yischazik is chazik. There's already a nega. There's something happening. There's something happening that's a sheer gris. He saw already a sheer gris. For that, you could open it up. So that is the discussion here of Achaba Yaakov held. You don't have a raya from Nigebatim to the din of Chazaka. Zog Gemara Tanya Deloiker of Achaba Yaakov. We actually have a brisa that seems to disagree with Achaba Yaakov because it says in the brisa, "V'yotza kohen min habayis yochol yelich l'soich beisay v'yasker." You might think the kohen can go home to his own house. He could be far away. Talmud Loimer El Pesach Haboyis. He's got to be by the doorway. If Pesach Haboyis, if it says Pesach Haboyis yochol yamoy tachas hamashkoy v'yasker, maybe you would think the kohen has to be still in the doorway when he locks up the house. Talmud Loimer min habayis, he has to be completely out of the house. Achiyetzim min habayis kulei. Where should the kohen be standing when he locks the door? Oimid b'tzana mashkoif umaskir. Uminayin shem holach l'soich beisa v'hisker. How do you know that what if he didn't lock the house till he went all the way to his own house? Oisha amad b'soich habayis v'hisker. Or if he locked the house while he was still in the house. Shesgere musker, that is called a hesker. Obviously locking doesn't mean turning the key, because he's in his house. It means proclaiming it's sealed. Talmud Loimer, the hisker sabayis mikol makom. So the problem here is clearly here you see that he's going to be able to be soiger the house as a valid hesker even though he's in his house. So it's quite clear that you need to rely on chazaka. V'Rabacha b'Yaakov, how is he going to interpret this brisa? Zok Gemara, very simple. Kigoyin the kaimi dor the gavri. They had what you call a fireman's line. So yes, he walked home, but there was a whole bunch of people in between him and the home that were able to report to him live that the nega hasn't changed its form. There's someone standing right by the entrance of the house. He's watching. Toya says you don't mamish need that. Toya says it's good enough if you had one guy there, and when he did it, they told him, by the way, we checked at that time, it was still there. The reason why the Gemara says there was people there all the time, because the Gemara wants to give an example that in real time, the Kohen knows that it's there when he's making the Hesker.
Say that the time that the last guy came out of the house, it also shrunk.
No, he doesn't leave the house. He's waiting there.
Then how is he scared?
The Kohen has to leave the house, not some other spectator.
He's scared. He closes up the house, which means nobody else can go in the house.
Well, no, it means he's sealing it. It doesn't mean he can't leave, or maybe he's mamish on the doorpost looking. It's b'chai gavne where he's right there to look. So therefore, we would have known at the time that it didn't shrink, and therefore you still don't have to rely on chazaka. Okay, we'll stop here. Go ahead.